Hey guys, it's us again, Stephanie,
Emily,
and today we're going to do another book review on Whatever Happened to Interracial Love by Kathleen Collins, and it's a short story book.
So in this collection of short stories, Kathleen Collins writes kind of semi-biographically about her own experience as a 1960s Black intellectual. So around that time, if you need a bit of context, this is when like Martin Luther King Jr. is kind of coming out with the civil rights movement, not civil war movement, and also there's a lot of changes in the landscape as to where Black Americans can really go, and there are a lot of like the first generation graduates of college graduates of that generation, and I guess in her point of view, that's sort of a rarity because she's not only is she a Black graduate, she's also a female. So it was very interesting for me, at least, to sort of see that perspective.
And then we got this book for our December book of the month again.
I chose it.
She chose it. These are not the books I would choose ever, but I read it because she chose it, and we'll discuss it today. So for our first impressions, again, we're going to use the emojis. Okay, I already know what I'm thinking.
Okay, well, I'm choosing these two.
I'm choosing these two.
Okay. Oh, we have two.
Well, because this definitely made us like, this book definitely made me think. So this is a pondering kind of like thinking / confused emoji. And then this is my angry emoji. This is not really an angry, I'm just more like didn't like it. So I don't have a thumbs down emoji, so I'm using this to supplement that.
Yeah. For me, this emoji again is the same kind of idea. The book really did make me think about what's going on today, what was going on back then. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what that really means as we go along about this book. And my other facial expression, I guess, was kind of like this because there were certain things I learned in her prose that I had no idea, or maybe I had an idea, but I never really thought more about it. And I'll disclose more about that in this video. But yeah, definitely a thought-provoking piece of work, as well as one that made me see things really differently.
So we didn't have discussion questions this time from Book of the Month. I asked them, and they said that because people were actually mad that the questions kind of spoiled the book for some of them because they haven't finished it or they haven't started it yet, so they stopped doing that, and I couldn't find the questions on the website, so she came up with some questions since this is her book. And yep.
Okay, so our first question that I wanted to ask Stephanie is, what did you think about having to read a book of short stories?
Okay, so let me just say, I don't like short stories. Like, I've never liked them, mainly because I think I like books. Like, I will talk about this in my review as well. Yeah, I talked about this in my review as well, where I don't like the idea of short stories, mainly because I like the time it takes for me to really connect to the characters and the plot. And the short stories are kind of like a teaser, you know? They're like done within 3 to 5 pages, like less than even sometimes. And you're just starting to get to know the characters, you're starting to figure out what this little short story is about, and it's done. And I'm just like, that's it? Like, is there furthermore? Is there, continuation? And I mean, I still get that feeling even when I do read an actual, like, a regular full-length book, but it's especially like, it's especially true for short stories because, I mean, they're short stories for a reason. So I don't like short stories, and when I saw those short stories, I was like, I hate these type of books. So mostly my entire conversation today would be, I did not like it, just because I don't like short stories. But yeah.
So from my perspective, I chose this book, one, because I thought the topic was pretty inquisitive. Like, I've never actually really read, other than for high school, I don't really read Black fiction often. Like, I don't really, other than Toni Morrison and very well known like Maya Angelou, like, I don't know too much about Black writers. That's for my own discretion. But so for me, in terms of it being a short collection of short stories, like she said, I think they're short stories for a reason.
Yeah.
But I think in an insightful way. I wouldn't necessarily say that I like the fact that the stories were very like abrupt either. There were times when like I was just getting into the character, like you said, and then it's like, oh, it's the end. And I'm like, oh, okay.
There were I think there were like 2 stories in there that I actually kind of liked, and I would have wished there was more to it.
You can check.
Yeah. I think one of them was like the main one, like what happened to Interracial Love. Yeah, because that was like it's the name of the whole book, you know. So I don't know where it is.
But like,
that was
for me in general, I thought the collection of short stories worked because of the fact that there were so many different types of facets that came with, I guess, how things were kind of encompassed in the book itself. There was like an angle where you're talking about like what it means to be a Black American at that time, a Black American who resisted against the Jim Crow laws back in the South. But there's also the idea of like, what does it mean to be romantic with people at that time as a person of color? And I think that's also something that really did allow sort of a mirror, like a multi-mirror effect, and that's more or less what I thought these short stories were about. Like the fact that you get to see this angle, that angle, in terms of stories. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you just checked the main story. It's actually quite long. I think it's a good like.
Okay, so you liked Whatever Happened to Interracial Love, and
mainly because it was longer, and I was like, okay, you get the characters a little bit more. Okay, but I don't remember the second one. I think it was after that. I was like one of the ones after that. I was kind of like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting.
I actually like the Happy Family the most. The story itself, it's about what was it? It was about how like she goes and interviews, is always around this family that she assumes is really happy. But then things aren't what they seem, of course, and different reasons kind of like come about the undoing of the family, and it obviously pertains a lot to that era in time. And yeah, so that was my first question. So my second question for Stephanie is, was there anything that was really thought-provoking and different about the stories here in terms of what you learned in history class about like the 1960s? Like, did you ever like feel like there was anything like, because I definitely found out about something.
Well, it was interesting. I don't know if there was anything specific, but it was definitely interesting to read on a perspective of like a Black American, African American versus, you know, the history textbooks. So I would say that was kind of a different perspective. But the thing is, okay, so the thing about this book, another reason why I wasn't like not super fond of this book, not just because of the short story, it's also because like my cultural differences is very big in comparison to like African Americans. Like I don't know, other than like the basics, like I didn't grow up with their culture. I didn't grow up like, you know, their whatever they experienced back in the day. Like I'm sure it was very different than what, you know, my ethnicity, the people that, you know, from the homeland or the motherland experienced in the 1960s. So for me, it's like, I don't know, I couldn't really like connect with them as much, mainly because like the cultural difference is just too much for me to like connect with. And not only that, but like it was also right after, it was just, I don't know, it was just very difficult for me to connect with. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to sum it up. For me, I definitely agree from your point of view. She uses a lot of like symbolic wording that of the time,
right?
That unless you were like, I guess, a scholar of that era or you grew up during that time, you don't really understand the depth of how much it might hurt or how
like there are these terminologies that just like doesn't connect to me, and it's
or
like
the angle it goes for.
Exactly.
For me though, despite of that though, I felt that particular sort of dissonance actually helped me understand a little bit more of why these type of prose, why it's important that these type of prose get read. Because for me, prior to this book, my only exposure to Black culture
Yeah.
Other than, you know, mainstream like
Right.
rap, etc. Was through English class, like Toni Morrison. A lot of about it was about slavery, what happened directly after slavery, maybe like about the poor group of people in the South, and also in terms of history class, like a sort of brief overview of like what happened to this group in terms of like very like like facts in general about what was going on. But this book really lets you understand it from someone who has been read, who has an excellent college education, and who just is also, you know, Black at that time. And it's not really a perspective you get to talk about a lot, other than like movies like The Great Debater. But even then, like that story itself is a lot more about the debating, going against the odds of being like, you know, not really about the individuals, the Black individuals, but more about like, we're a team. We're gonna go against Harvard, you know, and win this argument. While her stories are more much about like, what does it mean to be me? You know, in this, alive at this time. And the fact that she is actually relatively unknown also really helped with my understanding about how I want to write also as a writer, just because just given like our current climate as well. I do have a lot of respect for this author, just because she, I may not understand her, but she definitely helped me realize that regardless of who reads your work, or if it ever gets read, your perspective is definitely unique. So like, I'm sure that like in a lot of ways, anything that I write about, there will be people who don't understand me, and my experiences are definitely not among the mainstream. I don't even think yours isn't either. And so the fact that it can get lost and then maybe refound is a great, I guess, encouragement, as well as a good message that comes along with reading a book like this, because I don't understand her at all.
I don't understand her
that much. I do understand her disillusion with like her time and era, but overall, like, we have a lot of differences, obviously, but that I can connect with, the idea that like my voice is deserving of attention regardless if anyone actually gives it to me, because of the fact that my perspective is one of a kind, and so is yours. So yep, that's it. Okay, so my third question is that the story happens in 1960 in New York. How does that differ from your experience right now living in New York City? Like, do you feel like there's changes in the
That's
landscape?
a good thing. I like the fact that our December books, both of them are set in the city, and I was like, yay!
What was your December book?
The Sun is also a star.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't have known.
Oh yeah.
If they watched the video.
Yeah. So it's that review is in a different video, link below, if you want to check that out. But for both books that we picked for December are both set in New York City, which I really like, because it kind of gave me a background of, you know, it's a good contrast actually between this is like 1960s versus Sun is also a star, where it's set more to modern day. So it was a good, like, you know, contrast between the two times, and I really like that. I thought it was a good contrast. Again, like I said, like 5 times.
Me too, because I definitely appreciated how New York itself as a city has really changed based on like what has happened historically, what's happened culturally, and I in some way don't recognize New York that she was talking about. Yeah. But then I also do in other ways. And I think that's a pretty you had that feeling too, right? Like, you, as you read it, even though you didn't like it, it's like, oh yeah, like this little bits of it being like, oh, I understand why people act that way, or why people don't act that way anymore. And so overall, like, my experience as a 20-something-year-old in New York, because she's at this point, a lot of her short stories are about 20-something-year-olds and their struggle of like trying to commit to someone, if not like a direction in life, right? Like, I would definitely say I would definitely relate to that in general, like the idea of like, oh, should I do this? Should I not do this? I want to be this. I don't want to be that. It's a lot of like right and wrong and no right and wrongs. So I definitely say that that's something I liked about this book, and I really appreciated the fact that it happened in New York, because then it's even more poignant for me. And
Exactly. Especially when we live here,
yeah.
you know, and you can really see how much, like you said, how much the city has changed over the past few decades. Yeah. And also the cultural differences as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
It's
All right. So mine is still this. I mean, this definitely it still made me think a lot. For sure. After our discussions, but I still don't like it. Like, end of the day, story choice not my favorite. It's just just not my kind of book.
Okay. Well, I tried to change my mind because I realized that this kind of represents both of what I was trying to convey in the first place, but also the fact that after talking about it with you, it made me like the book more, because I started to slowly identify with the character more, strangely enough. As you can tell about like the fact that she's 20-something, she's trying to figure out her life as a writer in New York City, and I feel like that's not a journey that's really that unique to me. It was a good book, and it made me think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
So anyway, thank you for watching, everyone.
Thank you.
This is the end of our book review for Whatever Happened to Interracial Love. And I will link the description. I'll link the Goodreads link below in the description box, so you can check that out. I will also link the Book of the Month link in case you want to purchase the book and you're interested in actually reading it, as well in the description box. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.